So what we're going to do, we're going to just kind of talk through some of these topics and then really open it up to everyone for questions. So as people probably know, if you've been here all weekend, I'm a medical doctor. I'm Canadian and American board certified in both integrated medicine and family medicine. And now I'm over here in the UK, and I've recently joined on to Collective Hemp as their chief medical officer, and very excited about that. And as part of this whole subject, business and medicine and how it can work together, where the trouble points are, I think it's really important to have an open discussion because as doctors we're taught to avoid industry in medical school, but yet the drugs that we prescribe and our prescribing decisions are very heavily influenced by pharmaceutical reps who come into our office. And in a busy office where you're seeing 50 patients in a day, oftentimes a lot of doctors are not reading research, they're relying on pharmaceutical reps to help them make their decisions. So in fact, we are quite influenced by industry, and I think it's not a bad thing to be involved and to educate ourselves and to be involved with great companies. So, when I always open this up by saying, the common enemy here, I don't believe is big pharma. The common enemy is a lack of education. And when it comes to cannabis, the prohibition of cannabis for the better part of the last century, because it's put everyone behind. And I think the other trend we're seeing with cannabis's resurgence and CBD is it's really kind of being led by a grassroots movement of patients who have been failed by the medical system. And the trend that I've seen as both a conventional medicine doctor and an integrated medicine doctor in the last decade of practicing medicine is that people are no longer trusting their GP for their health and their wellness needs and advice. They're getting those pieces of advice from their yoga teacher, their meditation teacher, their nutritionist online, from companies, lots of different sources. And we have to ask why that's happening. Well, one of the reasons is we get 2 hours of nutritional training in medical school. I had to do an entire another degree to learn all those things myself. So the doctors don't have the training, and also the pill-based approaches of Western medicine are not cut out for these chronic diseases, especially the stress-related chronic diseases we're seeing, the autoimmune diseases. Western medicine, that's not where we have the best toolkit. So it's, as my grandma would always say, you have to get the right tool to get the job done. Well, Western medicine doesn't have the best toolkit for a lot of these chronic conditions, and that's where natural medicine and cannabinoid therapy can really play a huge role. And actually leading that charge are patients, users, and companies. So that's a good segue into the next part.
And I think we, from Colorado, we come from the U.S., and we have obviously pushed a lot of the pharmaceutical Western style approaches, not only throughout the U.S. but out into the world. And we're seeing more and more, I call it a backlash against that, but I think it can also be an overreach in that backlash, where you'll hear companies talk about, well, we're going to go up against big pharma, we're going to punch pharma in the nose. It's really not the way to approach it, and big pharma has done an incredible number of wonderful things for medicine, while unfortunately tending to obfuscate the other options that are available. And so even in our culture, we've started to have more and more acceptance of integrated wellness approaches, where the idea of, I'm going to my naturopath or my holistic healer, my herbalist, all those things have value, but they tended to be almost denigrated in terms of their real applicability and efficacy. And so as that mindset changes, we understand that each one of those disciplines can really be helpful. The introduction of cannabis into that wellness regimen is such a natural alternative and opportunity to create really extraordinary, innovative cannabis-based medicines around those new approaches that we, as at least Americans, and I think the rest of the world, are more and more open to accepting, and it's wonderful to be a part of that, and then obviously to have brought Dr. Dani on board with us to help create those formulations, start to do real clinical testing on rare and trace cannabinoids that we aren't generally familiar with just yet. You'll start to see things like CBG, CBC out on some people's stands here, and we're starting to see more and more of that in the U.S. as well. You'll also see things like CBDV coming out, THCV. There's a variety. There's obviously, everyone's pretty aware at a show like this, there's 100+ other cannabinoids that we've yet to explore, but very few of those. We've just barely seen the initial acceptance of CBD. So there's a lot of ground to tread, and to have a medical practitioner that's also an integrative wellness specialist. It's kind of the approach that we expect the consumer to take as well. Definitely consult your doctor. Definitely look at pharmaceutical options. Also look at alternative therapies. Also look at meditative practices. Also look at cannabis as a potential opportunity. I was in the THC, the marijuana vaporizer space, since about 2010, and from Colorado, so that opportunity became available to us a little bit earlier than most other places. And so getting into the THC vaporizer space, we were looking for a marijuana oil, an extract that didn't have residual solvents in it, because we saw a lot of extracts with still have residuals of hexane and butane and those either chemical additives or chemical excipients that were used in the extraction process would still be there in the oil. And my partner Ralph and I really were focused on finding cleaner ways to extract the oil from the marijuana flower. And so we started using CO2 back in 2010, when really no one very, very few people had done that. It's quite expensive. The least expensive alternatives tended to be the ones that left the most residuals in that product.
This is really topical, because I just did a piece for the Sunday Times Magazine. It just was printed this morning over breakfast. I was reading it about the problems we're having now in the UK with the black market THC vapes for the same reason. A lot of them are homemade, or they're made with these less clean methods, right. And it's the same problem. So it's repeating itself. It is repeating itself, and while we're now seeing a lot more larger organizations willing to extract oils from cannabis materials, that's still just trending the direction of the real scaled manufacturers. They already scaled botanical extraction companies and manufacturers. So we're seeing this replay in CBD, where and all the rare cannabinoids is, first you need the plant genetics right, then you need the right material to extract from. Once you get that extraction, it needs to be of a quality and represented by the companies who are bringing these products out in really quality ingredient profiles that have the efficacy sometimes that we can't go out and sell. Yeah. Because we want to make health claims on things that we know are effective. Dani's had thousands of patients on some of these therapeutic doses already, but we can't necessarily bring those products out yet. We can't make health claims on any of the cannabinoids just yet. So there's those challenges that we all have to accept, that it's really important you set that high bar. We did it with the CO2 extraction in the marijuana industry in the U.S., and it basically became the standard, because once you set that bar and you aggregate a few of the top level producers to abide by a set of standards in any product you make, that noise of everyone else that's in the space starts to fall away. And so as we're creating these at far heightened costs, some of these the rare and trace cannabinoids can be $30,000-$40,000 a kilo still, but integrating those into the ingredient profiles of the products, and then just understanding we're going to bear the cost of those for a while. And I think that's something that we've been working, with when I'm working with Collective Hemp on my line, which is CINA. That's something we've been talking about even this morning, is the products I want to create and we are creating are really expensive to make, and it's easier just to cut corners, and it's not a clear-cut problem, because if you're a small startup, you might not be able to do it all the way, but these are issues we're always encountering in the industry, and as the technology gets better, we're going to have more options, but that technology comes at a cost. So, every company has to make their own decision where they fit into the market, but I think consumers are going to get pickier and pickier. Right now, consumers may not, we know because we're at this conference, we're speaking to the converted, but the average consumer in the UK might yet not know the difference between one product or another, but soon they will. People are pretty good at getting savvy pretty quickly. And I think when I give advice to other women entrepreneurs, I'm a part of many women's networks, women in cannabis networks, and I always get asked by new founders, what should I be doing? I think creating a really good quality product, taking your time is really important. Obviously, you want to get it to market as quickly as you can, but at the same time, the products that are out there that are good quality, that are being tested properly, that have in it what they say they have in it, those are going to rise to the top very quickly, and the stuff that's not great will quickly, I think, evaporate.
I found it interesting today. We had an attorney drop by, and he's well versed in packaging, getting into the CBD and hemp side of the finished goods, basically packaging review analysis. And he walked in and checked out some of our packaging and thought, oh, you guys, it's great. You have an ingredient profile on here. And it was uncanny to hear that, as if that isn't the norm. Like, you don't even have some people don't even have the ingredient profile listed, much less in some detail with transparency and availability of additional white paper information behind it. So I think there's just a bar that is required to be set. And most of these products, we have a few different lines of products, one being designed for the understanding that the base oils, the CBD cannabinoid itself, the tinctures, the soft gels, the creams, they're all going to be very commoditized very quickly. And while we see production in hemp scaling up around the world, the demand has barely been scratched yet. So those products will commoditize quite quickly, but there's also then the real opportunity is to expand on that knowledge that you gain from bringing out CBD products, testing them properly, adhering to mass retail standards, because mass retail standards are considerably higher than even what you would be required to be able to sell in an independent health store or in a vape shop. There's an additional level of scrutiny that mass retail puts on you, and it's worth going through the challenge, even if you're not approaching mass retail yet, because your company will grow, the product sets will grow, you'll continue to innovate, but getting that fundamental baseline of compliance is so critical. And then to be, for us, it was a wonderful opportunity to partner with Dr. Dani. It also raises the bar again on us, and we're comfortable with that. And we know we have to strive to meet Dr. Dani's expectations, which aren't, there's some, we get to butt heads here and there a little bit.
Yeah, and it's that's why I like working with you guys so much, because I've almost launched lines in the past, botanical lines, because people say, yes, we want to do a line with you. And then it gets down to the production and it's a bit expensive. So I think it always has to be a dance, because of course, we want the products to be perfect. I want everything to be biodegradable in the next 12 months. That's not going to happen right now, but there's always a compromise somewhere. But I think you have to have those conversations, because I think this industry is really going to raise the bar for standards on both the cosmetic side, the CBD infused cosmetics, and on the edibles side. And I think it's, thinking about this is really important up front, because it seems like if you're just getting into the space, I have entrepreneurs and a lot of people in finance all the time who just want to make a quick buck. They want to get into CBD, just slap something up, put something out in, a month or two. Just, it's probably not the best long-term business plan.
No, it's not. And I think yesterday I talked a little bit about the pace of change and we'll just talk about this industry specifically. But in the THC side, we had 10, 12, 14. It took us 14, 15 years to really build up an organization we were selling products into 17 states. We were in 4 different countries. That was a real high watermark in that industry. And at the time, it still is a considerable task. That company went public the first part of this year. We were quite pleased with that. It really became a recreational marijuana company, and it does extraordinary work in that side of the business. but it wasn't really based in wellness. And so as my partner and I formed the CBD side of the company and then took that outside of that organization, really focused in wellness, really focused in integrative opportunities to integrate cannabis products into the world of pharmaceuticals, and not necessarily wanting to go butt heads with pharma, but want to be complementary to the opportunities for efficacious applications. Excuse me. The pace of that felt really fast, and it was 14 years of grinding away to get this company public. This is happening in a
Months.
Quarter of that time,
Yeah.
a tenth of that time. And so there was an awareness and an acceptance and an adoption of marijuana that is not having to cross the same hurdles with non-psychoactive, non-psychotropic applications of cannabis. And so, you just have to strive for the high water mark early and understand that the requirement for that's going to catch up with you almost instantaneously anyway.
Absolutely. And we know we've already seen that in some products being pulled from the shelves and so forth in the UK and in Europe. So I think if you're on the business side listening to this, I think that's the message. Research your products well, know what's in them, and educating your consumers is always helpful for the brand and for the whole industry, because I think our industry is going to be judged by all of us here who are the companies that are leading the way. I also work with regulators in the UK, and I do a lot of media work, and the perception of the whole industry is really based on how well we can all work together, even though technically we're competitors, but actually we're all trying to work together to push the industry forward and educate. Because I think the thing about CBD, which to me is so cool, is many people I know in the UK who have never smoked cannabis, it's very much cannabis is for stoners. It has a very bad reputation, but they have arthritis, they're in the baby boomer generation, and they all want to use CBD. So since we've moved back to the UK, most of my parents and their friends have started to use CBD and started to ask questions, and they're all using it topically, they're taking CBD oil, they're ordering it as part of their supplement regimen, so it's so accessible. And I think it has the opportunity to push forward natural medicine as well as cannabinoid therapy as a whole. So I think it's a really exciting industry to work in. Something we haven't touched on yet, but I usually mention when I do business talks, is if you're just at the beginning of starting a CBD company here in the UK, something you should think about is payment processing in banks, because some payment processing, especially online in banks, will shut you down once they find out you're selling CBD. Another friend of mine who's actually my competitor, but we're quite good friends, and she's sorted it out now, and she consults and helps other women, but her startup had this trouble in the beginning, and it's something to really think ahead if you're just setting up, and get good legal counsel. I don't know if he's sitting in the audience, but one of his colleagues is Robert Jappy, who just spoke, and his colleagues are here from Switzerland. They're a great law firm to consult with in this space, and there's a few others as well. So just get good legal counsel up front, because it's expensive, but it can save you money in the long term. It's another thing that I've learned on the business side.
Absolutely. I've learning on the medical side. I'm not quite a double board certified practitioner just yet, but I think. Do you want to open it up for questions, or do you? Yeah. I think we can just sort of open it up for questions and any sort of dialogue about where you are in your own journey in this industry, what we might be able to assist with in any manner. The questions you have for Dani on the medicinal and wellness side, for sure.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, just a question around the medicinal end. I'm really here as an investor potentially into the industry, but I also have some investments in GP practices, especially around the pharmacies. And we're finding quite a lot of people coming and asking in those pharmacies about CBD products. Any advice, guidance as to what to do and how the general understanding of that is in the UK?
So I just wrote a paper that's been accepted in the British Journal of Family Practice on the case for GPs prescribing here in the UK. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to completely change the medical market when it does. I think GPs are the best people to prescribe, and I think besides GPs, we need to get the pharmacists involved because they are the people that are interacting with patients on a daily basis. The line that I'm launching with Collective Hemp is going to have a pro line for pharmacists, natural health practitioners, anyone with a license, a health practitioner license in the UK. For that reason, it'll be hemp based, so it'll be without a prescription, but very clinical doses, because I think it is important for them to get involved. What I would say currently, as far as advice, if you're getting involved with these investments, for now, GPs cannot prescribe hemp-based CBD products because it's not made as a medication. It's a technicality. But what they can say to patients is, this may help you. The WHO has released a report saying it's safe. It's a safe substance in humans. It's very hard to hurt yourself with these things. And just, use the adage, start low, go slow. So they can say that without fear of retribution from their regulatory commission. Pharmacists, if you're stocking, I just did a commission report for a big pharmacist company, and actually it was another association of pharmacists for the Irish market. And basically in this 30-page report, I just said, okay, well, if you're going to stock CBD products, which I think you should because it's a great product, you need to make sure they're coming from a reputable company. They have not only just testing, but they're using a lab that's reputable to test their products, and they have multiple lab reports because sometimes one lab report will be slightly different than the next, depending if they're using HPLC or gas chromatography. And then you can say things around, this may help with general wellness, stress. You can say things like it might support sleep, might support the stress response, might support mood, might support feelings of anxiety or a calm, peaceful mental state. But you cannot say directly, making medical claims that it's going to treat a disease. Yeah. You're good.
Scott, do you have anything further to add to that? Sorry? Do you have anything further to add to what Dani said in terms of answering the question? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions? It's a great opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to have Dani and Scott on the panel here. I would make use of their wisdom, their experience, their failures, their successes. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is King David. I've been following Dani since the last CBD Expo, and she's provided a lot of good information for me. My question to Dani right now is, what's the chances of legal marijuana being legalized here in the UK shortly? How long is that going to take? And what are some of the lobbying issues that we need to consider in order to make help move this process along?
That's a great question. I wish if I had the answer to that question, I would be a millionaire. So, how long do I think it's going to take? Well, let's put it this way. Canada legalized medical cannabis in 2001. I became a doctor and started practicing medicine in 2009, and I didn't know about cannabis. I was told in medical school, all the while this was a medication we could prescribe legally, that cannabis was going to cause people to go crazy. So that will give you an idea. So it took us 20 years to get to legalization in Canada. I don't think it's going to take that long in the UK. Some people might not agree with me, but I do think in the next 5 to 10 years we will probably see legalization. I'm a harm reductionist, so I think I'm pro-legalization for a lot of these things, personally. Because I think, you can have problems with substances, of any substance. I mean, alcohol addiction is a huge problem, but it's legal. And alcohol addiction is a health problem. It's not a criminal problem. The problem is when we have cannabis not legalized, in my opinion, is any problems with it, and there's actually less problems with it than there are with alcohol, which is already legal. But if you do have a problem, it's a criminal problem, and I don't think it should be. I think it should be a health problem. And the same thing with many other substances. soon going to be joining another nonprofit working group for psychedelics that are being studied at Imperial College, like psilocybin. And the same arguments could be said about these types of things. So what do I think we need to do to not muck it up? It's a tricky one as well. I think we have to have a balanced argument when we respond to things like the NICE guidelines that were very negative that just came out. I got asked by the media to respond, and some of my colleagues, Professor David Nutt, who I know quite well and respect him immensely, Professor Barnes. I mean, these are all really good friends and colleagues. They were very, very blunt. I was a bit more, shall we say, restrained in my response, because if we alienate the policymakers and the people who are sitting on these committees too much, it can set us back. So I think we really have to have this open door policy of inclusivity. And I've learned this in Canada, because when I first started practicing 10 years ago, I was teaching people mindfulness-based stress reduction, meditation. I was combining herbal medicine with drug therapy, and people thought it was really out there. And now it's accepted, but I didn't get converts of my colleagues from pushing them away. I got them from opening my doors and educating and wanting to build bridges. So I think we really have to be careful we don't get our backs up too much, because I think it could set us all back. Yeah.
I think it's really important also to understand that the, again, it's that pace of change, but as each state in the United States legalized, you start to see a momentum get generated that is pretty powerful, and then there's tax revenues associated with it, but the stigma starts to wear away. And as that stigma wears away, in our case, state by state, we can see full legalization right around the corner. Now, that being said, full legalization doesn't necessarily mean that the regulatory framework is clear with which you'll work under as a business person. It may be that you don't get arrested anymore, but they're technically, just being a CBD company in the United States right now, we could still go to federal prison. It's not going to happen, but that's once it is declared legal. There's still a pretty long process that happens in defining what that legality looks like in each different state, province, township. Dan Harris in the back there, one of the greatest advocates we have for legalization. He can quote chapter and verse on years and years of the process that has taken, particularly in California. Colorado became really available, and the clarity within which you could work in Colorado happened far before that did happen in California, except for that it was declared legal in California many, many years before Colorado. So there is that there'll be a tipping point, a threshold of acceptability that will then allow, the legislators usually will come in behind the advocates. So that's a really important distinction, is we have to continue the push, we have to continue to maintain not just quality, but innovation, continue awareness. Education is such a huge priority, and then the legislatures generally follow.
I think the stigma is a big thing, as Scott really rightly pointed out. I mean, this plant has been demonized. This plant has acquired morals. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, plants don't have morals, but this plant has acquired them over the last 100 years. It has really nothing to do with the biological activity of the plant. So this is something we need to really combat. Yeah.
Right.
Hello. Yeah. So it's about changing the conversation about marijuana, basically. I mean, it's been demonized for so long, so we have to change the conversation. So again, my question is, what are some suggestions that you all would have in order to, just to help change that conversation? Besides, all, and inclusive, we all got to work together and all, but we're fighting an uphill battle.
I think education is really the cornerstone, and I don't even call it marijuana anymore. I call it cannabis, because I don't like where that word came from. It was used to equate anti-racist, anti-Mexican campaign. It was the slang Mexican word, as you know, I'm sure, for cannabis. And it was, I think even changing the words we use are important. So how can we help? I think just educating people around the plant. And I think the science is really important, because if you're a scientist or even a legislator, to ignore research that makes you a bad scientist. And I think that is a powerful statement when we're talking to the powers that be about cannabis. What else can we do? I think just getting the message out there that of all of the things that the plant can do and breaking the stereotypes about THC. THC is really, everyone's scared of THC, but low doses of THC in the right patient on the medical side combined with CBD is incredibly therapeutic. And yeah, just challenging the stereotypes.
Thank you.
I have one question, if that's okay. What are the fears of physicians around stocking or having in their practice CBD products? Are there any risks around malpractice insurance and things like that? You know, can you sort of, I guess, articulate that, if you could?
Yeah. So if you are a medical doctor in the UK, you cannot prescribe hemp-based CBD. But if you are a medical doctor in the UK, you can write a private prescription for medical cannabis. The problem is the expense is crazy right now because there's no bulk importations. And as long as you're doing that medical prescription for medical cannabis within due diligence and you believe after a full assessment of the patient that it's the right thing for them, it's fine. You're allowed to prescribe it for any indication, not just for pain, not just for epilepsy. A lot of prescribers don't realize that. So as far as stocking it, you know, medical practitioners are probably not going to be stocking this. Even cannabis clinics, it's not going to be in the back room. I mean, there's going to be pharmacies that have this as a Schedule II controlled medication, just like other Schedule II medications. So there's this fear, there's this hysteria, I think, around, oh, these cannabis clinics are going to open and there's going to be stockpiles of weed in the back. It's not going to happen. It's going to be very medical, very legitimate and above board.
Yeah, I very much agree, and we still have, there's obviously retail products, then there's products with higher therapeutic doses available for the professional market, licensed practitioners, then there's OTC products that actually do require an additional level of scrutiny and certification, and then there's pharmaceuticals, and each one of those categories provides opportunity for everyone. You just have to know clearly the distinction between those channels.
I understand from your earlier speech today that the current standard proceeding in order to get new medicine, new products accepted into the market, the RCT, is not ideal for cannabis products, as you cannot isolate a certain ingredient that well with cannabis. So how do you feel what would be necessary to be changed in that standard proceeding in order to have more CBD and hemp products being officially accepted in the health system?
So it's a great question. So it's on two sides. So hemp-based CBD wellness products, they can't be marketed for a medical condition, but certainly what would help even the hemp industry on that side would be more real-world use studies. So companies could collect data on how people are using their products and for what symptoms they're using it for, and sharing that data would probably be very helpful. That's not considered research from an academic point of view, but I think it'd still be helpful. The NHS actually, in response to NICE, then the NHS came out after and said something a bit more promising. They said, well, we do realize that RCTs for cannabis probably don't work. I was like, yay, something positive. And what that means is, you know, even with medical cannabis, collecting data from clinics who prescribe medical cannabis. There's a project but run by an organization, a charity called Drug Science, who I'm involved with Professor David Nutt, and they're doing a project called 2021. And they're trying to enroll thousands of patients for medical cannabis and looking at the results. So I think these types of projects are really important. It's hard to get funding for them, especially for nonprofits, but I believe they're almost there, and I think they're going to do it. It's going to be, I mean, it's an incredibly lofty ambition, but I do think they're going to accomplish it, and I think this is what we need. So we need more observational data. We need to expand the definition of what is evidence-based medicine. to these real world data sets. And in the States, this is already happening. There's a guy called Daniel Schechter, who's been one of my mentors for 10 years, and he's been doing this for 30 years in the US. He was the person who ushered in evidence-based medicine and this RCT model. And then he got sick himself and realized it didn't work for a lot of mental health conditions and other things. So he started campaigning against his initial campaign. And he's very prominent in the US. He's worked for the Clinton administration and a lot of other interesting organizations. And he's like, and there's a lot of papers to support this now. I've just actually written a paper about this and submitted it to the Royal College of Physicians here, that we're entering an era of what's really called post-evidence-based medicine, where we recognize that RCTs were the drug development funnel. Now we need to look more broadly, because that actually wasn't really good medicine, what we were doing. That was a narrow sliver of medicine geared towards what pharmaceutical companies are able to accomplish with the drug development funnel. That's not necessarily saying they're bad, but that's what they were doing. That's not what we're trying to do with cannabis. So I think there is hope, but these are the types of things I think need to happen.
Can I get one more?
One more, please.
I'm afraid there will not be much support from the big pharmaceutical companies in order to have procedures being changed in favor of CBD or hemp. Do you feel like that non-profit organizations could step in? Because also from your earlier speech, CBD and hemp could be beneficial to so many of the really big health issues like MS, anxiety and so on that do affect a lot of people, and that I also, well, at least in Switzerland, do receive a lot of support from non-profit organizations. Do you feel like they could be gained?
So yeah, I volunteer a significant amount of my time for a number of nonprofit organizations in the UK for that very reason, because I do think they're important. And I think they've driven a lot of the conversation change around medical cannabis with Alfie, Hannah's mom, and Billy, and Charlotte, and these cases of these kids. The nonprofits that they've been involved with have really driven a lot of that policy change. So I think it can make a difference. And the stronger these organizations are, I think it can really shift things. So yeah, I totally think that is valuable, and that's why I put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and volunteer my time for a lot of these organizations. Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Dr. Dani and Scott Calliham for their time, their wisdom, their insight. Thank you once again.